Hello and welcome back to Collector Creations. In this Anatomy of a Blu-ray, forget its nickname that, we're looking at TV Movie of the Week, Collection 1 from Imprint. It's part of their television line, but they are all movies. This is a really nice box, so we'll dive straight into it. It's set up like you've got an old 70s TV in front of you, and also a TV guide on the back, which is pretty nifty in terms of design. So yeah, it's obviously very reflective, hence the viewfinder, but you do get 3 images from the 3 films, including, what is that? That one is Scream Pretty Peggy, you've got Baffled, and you've got The Deadly Dream. And it obviously tells you that as well on the base there, which aligns it pretty nicely, actually. I gotta be honest, that's pretty convenient. If only I had to realize that before I was saying anything. One spine has all of the numbers, plus just has all the TV with their, same as here, telling you what the titles are. But on the back, without the numbers, you get each image from the film, if it'll focus, yeah. So that's not too bad, get some variation of it, that's for sure. And on the back, you do get the title on the top and some barcode and all that stuff on the base. But the back, again, whilst having the title, actually features what looks more like a newspaper clipping, what you would have for like a TV guide. Newspaper clipping. It's a TV guide. I still grew up on this stuff. I believe it still exists. And I really like that because it tells you, it's like Monday evening, you get, your weather, your sports briefing, in News in Perspective, and that's 7:30. On Channel 2 in colour, the American spelling of colour without the U, movie thriller The Deadly Dream, USA, 1971. A scientist has reoccurring dreams in which he is pursued by a mysterious tribunal for something that he's not aware that he's done. He comes to realise that his dreams may have become his reality. It tells you who the director is, the runtime, hour and 13 minutes, cast, Lloyd Bridges, Janet Leigh, and so on and so forth, and a nifty little image of the two down below. At 8 o'clock on Channel 5, you have movie thriller Baffled from the UK 1972, and again tells you what the film's about. Tommy Kovack is a hard-nosed racing driver until a sudden supernatural vision causes a near-fatal crash. He is further shaken from the bizarre event when Michele Brent convinces him the visions he experienced are highly significant and takes him to the real-life manor house from his vision. Again, director, runtime an hour and a half, or an hour 36 minutes. Cast including Leonard Nimoy and Susan Hampshire and a couple others, and Vera Miles, who's kind of more of the main character, but still. And then the last one is on Channel 13, movie horror Scream Pretty Peggy from the USA 1973. College student and aspiring artist Peggy takes a housekeeping job at a mansion where sculptor Jeffrey lives with his elderly mother. Things get strange when Peggy discovers a third resident, Jeffrey's hopelessly insane sister. Dun dun dun! Spoilers, I guess. An hour and 14 minutes with Betty Davis and Ted Bissell. I don't actually know who any of the other cast members are there. But yeah, it's really nice. I love the design. It's a wonderful design, and of course it's the hard case. You get each individually inside, so let's take a gander. So you have your little... I don't even really know what these are called anymore. It's not exactly an art card, but of course it details all the special features on each release, including runtime, aspect ratio, and the like. There's not too much to emphasize, but I'll go into each individual release. First up, we have The Deadly Dream. Nice artwork, featuring your 2 leads of Lloyd Bridges and the woman who I've now forgotten the name of, Janet Leigh, that's the one. Get some spine art, which is all red, as well as the back, which again tells you about the special features and everything. It only has a audio commentary by Amanda Reyes, Dan Budnick, and Nathan Johnson from the Made for TV Mayhem Show podcast 2024. I don't know if I showed that before, but, nice disc art and everything. Again, it's very copy-pasted from the main art. It also says 1080p high-definition presentation of a 2K scan from the original 35mm negative by Imprint, which is really nice. It is an hour and 13 minutes long. It is 1:33:1, so it's, letterboxed. It's a TV movie. It is actually a made-for-TV movie, an ABC made-for-TV movie. LPCM 2.0 mono, English language with optional hard of hearing subtitles. I'm going to dive into this, and then I'll dive into the rest. This one was interesting. I gave it 3 stars. I enjoyed it. It was an interesting thriller because as it goes, it begins to blend what the dreams are and what reality is. Lloyd Bridges is really fun. Jenna Lee initially kind of is like, what's she doing here? It's been 20 minutes and she hasn't done much, and then it kind of weaves you in. It becomes more predictable as to, why is she cast and certain other elements. So I found elements of it predictable in terms of its narrative. I won't spoil it just in case you actually want to watch it with a fresh eye. But it's a really fun, interesting thriller. And again, it's pretty short for an hour and 13 minutes. So I would definitely say it's worth watching. You're probably thinking, that's a really weird runtime. It's because it's made for TV. You get the extra, 15 minutes of ads, basically. So, yeah, it works out pretty well. It doesn't seem as obvious when there are meant to be ad breaks. There's only, once or twice that it feels like there's a proper, fade to black, and you're like, oh, here's where the ads are. But the rest of it flows really nicely, and it doesn't really emphasize it unless, it's probably, a hard cut between sequences. Suddenly he's asleep, and then you go into ad break, and then you come back from the ads, and he's awake, and he's actually not in his dream, or maybe it's the vice versa. So, I don't know how it was positioned originally, and nothing emphasizes it, but it doesn't have any real stop-start feelings to it. Visuals-wise, it is a really nice print. It definitely has a lot of wear and tear and damage, which is not a bad thing in this case. It's your casual specks and dirt and whatever. It's not completely cleaned up, but at the same time, for a 2K scan, it does look really nice. If you look away from the, blemishes that it occasionally has, it's still quite a nice print. For the most part, none of the blemishes or anything are distracting. It's so consistent that it looks natural, but it's not like a big splodge on someone's face or anything. It's just your regular, white specks and scratch marks occasionally. So it's not the most cleaned up effort, but at the same time, when you look beyond that, it's a really nice transfer, and the colors look really nice, the textures look really vibrant, so picture-wise, definitely really nice. So yeah, grain structure is healthy, a good amount of definition to the image, lots of nighttime scenes, and everything still looks good. You can still see things clearly, at least when you need to see them, because there are stylized images where you're not meant to see certain things. Certain characters are in shadows, for example, and it's not overly remastered to try and clear any of that up. It looks as it was shot, which is really nice. Audio-wise, it is the LPCM 2.0 mono mix. It sounded really good. It was not overly fantastic because there was still sounded like a kind of a punchy bass sound to the whole entire thing, but none of it was annoying or anything, and it depended on the scene. But everyone's dialogue was clear, and you can understand what they were saying. The music sounded good. For the most part, I have no real complaints with it. I'd say if there's any issues with it, realistically, it would be a product of the time, because it's lower budget, it doesn't have the better level of equipment, or in terms of how it was kept around in the vault, maybe, some age to it, much like with the picture. So it's never perfect, much like with the image, but it's good enough and it works for what it needs to. What do you call it? The audio commentary is the special feature, which I didn't dive into at all because, I don't know. But at the same time, for a 73-minute long film, an audio commentary is not a bad thing to jump into. So, yeah, for the most part, I think The Deadly Dream is a really nice feature on it. It's probably the most interesting of the 3. It was the most captivating. The performances are really nice, and the mystery kept going. It got to the point where I was like, they haven't any dream sequences in a while, but then you realize, oh, maybe that's deliberate. Maybe this is all the dream sequence, but maybe it isn't. It becomes like that. It's really nice. It's a really good thriller. So let's jump into Baffled. Now, this one has some really nice artwork. I think of the 3, this is the one that's clearly artwork that's actually designed, because in reality this one had a theatrical release, and I'm going to talk about both different cuts. But yeah, again, you get some nice artwork. Leonard Nimoy, some what looks like flames coming from his wrists with a bunch of different characters. It's interesting. It has a slew of special features there, which is really good, and disc artwork, inside artwork, same kind of jazz. Even The Deadly Dream is the same. Baffled it's the highest high of the set, but the lowest low at the same time. As a film, I didn't care much for it. And this is the extended version, the hour and 36 minutes. There is a shorter cut, which is in 1:33:1, which I believe I wrote down the runtime for it. The shorter version is 90 minutes long, but this one is 96 minutes long. There are possibilities that there's a 100-minute version, but that's really stipulated a lot in the special features, so I will definitely mention that. But let's talk about picture and audio first. Picture-wise, at least for the 1080, at least for the theatrical cut, I didn't watch the other one, but I imagine it's very, very similar because of the guy who edited the whole entire thing, or at least restored it. It looks fantastic. Like, I thought that The Deadly Dream was pretty good despite, its blemishes and whatever, but then you watch this and you're like, holy shit, this is a really, really nice remaster. Like, the coloring looks really nice, the image looks great. There's only a few times where, because of the restoration, the image can look a bit kooky, but that's mostly because there's some rear screen projection within the film when characters are driving. But again, there's a great video on it that details how they color matched it all, and it's insane the amount of detail that went into the picture. So the restoration is superb. It is a 2K restoration restored from the original 35mm elements by Imprint, and it just looks great. It looks really, really good. I just wish the film was better. Audio-wise, it is the LPCM 2.0 mono. I listened to it with headphones on because I couldn't be bothered. I had people in the next room watching the show, and I was like, I didn't want to have competing things. So, yeah, I watched it, and no, there was no issues with the audio at all. The only notable part, about 20 minutes in, there's a scene where two of the characters are talking, and it seems kind of isolated. It still is legible, you can understand what they're saying, and this similar effect happens a bit later in the film, but to not as much of a dramatic, noticeable degree. But again, it's, noted in the special features as well, so there's a reason why it exists. So, let's just dive into the special features before I talk about the actual film itself. So there are, again, two different versions of the film: the extended cut, which is 1:66:1, the theatrical aspect ratio, and the shorter cut in 1:33:1, the television aspect ratio, which is the US version, whereas the other is the original UK version. It has an audio commentary by restorer Jonathan Wood and ITC historian Rick Davey, and Psychic Restoration, a look at the challenges overcome in the grading and restoration of this new imprint edition, which was a 7.5 minute long video detailing how, in this case, Jonathan Wood, who basically narrates all the three featurettes, he restored the whole entire film, and he goes into detail as to how much work he put into it, how they would color grade it appropriately. There's the opening credit sequence is a montage of events that happen in the film, and he mentions how he was able to find footage because most of that was like either duplicated footage from after the film print had gone through and they had recut it into the start. So he edited the whole entire film except for that sequence, and then found those clips and reported them in. The only one he kept the same was the introductory title for Vera Miles' character, because he wanted the color grading to seem more appropriate than to what it actually looks like in the film. So the scene looks different to how it's actually showcased in the credit sequence. It's too dark in the credits, in the actual film, realistically, because it's at nighttime, but they do a lot of day for night shots. He was talking about how, again, the rear screen projection when they're driving, the color grading was off, so he had to change that, and that's for all the driving sequences. So, like, the stock footage that they use for driving versus what they actually filmed with in studio lights was different. There's a scene on a cliff where it's jumping between a studio set on a cliff and the actual cliff, like cutting between the two, and he recolor graded it so that the color of the sky was darker and it, like, suited more, so it blended more. And, like, he shows, shot-by-shot comparisons of what it used to look like and what it now looks like. And to be fair, if you want to say revisionist grading, sure, but it also fits in with what the style of the narrative is going for, so it works. It doesn't take you out of the picture because you're suddenly looking at a set. And to be fair, I looked and I'm like, man, that looks like a miniature, and then people are walking on. I'm like, that's not a miniature, but it looks a little fake, because it is a set. But then you contrast to the actual cliff, and it's like, that is a real cliff, and so that was great. It is a really interesting video, and really great that they actually went into detail showing how much work was put into it. Then you have Baffling Durations, a featurette on the film's runtime anomalies. This is an 8-minute long video. It, again, by Jonathan Wood, details the runtime of the film comparing the theatrical release to the US release. It also juxtaposes the extra scenes that are in the UK version, how some scenes were cut down for the US version, or like cut just a bit down, like slimmed off, like a character gets knocked out, and in the UK version they fall down, and in the shorter cut they don't fall down, but they still get knocked out. There's a whole scene that, because he was talking about the different runtimes and how different VHS releases and DVD releases have featured different runtimes on them, he believes most of them to be a lie. Like most, it said like on IMDb or whatever, it's a 100-minute long film, but this cut is 96 minutes because there is no 100-minute long film. He thinks that if there were scenes that were just cut out and they just don't exist anymore. One part in particular, Vera Miles comes into a room and is talking to a character about a certain thing that she was using before, but she's like, I wasn't using that thing before, and I'm like thinking, did I miss that scene? And no, he mentions it in this video, talking about how that scene just doesn't exist anymore. They just lost the footage. Or they simply filmed it and scrapped it for time and never went back to it, making it seem a bit more confusing because it is kind of like a whodunit. It's very interesting, so I really like that breakdown as well. And then you get Which Ratio, which is a 2-minute long featurette, just talking about how it was shot as the, open matte 4:3 ratio for TV things, but then for the cinematic ratio it's been, stretched out. It's not a complete full widescreen image like this, there's black bars on the side still, and he was comparing which one he feels is more appropriate. The 133 television cut, the American one, is in that ratio, but the theatrical one is in the larger one, so it's been stretched out. But there's no information that you're really missing. He even notes how there are credits on screen that clearly seem like they're meant to be in a wider screen ratio. Like if you were to cut out the top and bottom, you realize you're not missing any actual important information at all. This isn't like The Simpsons on Disney Plus where they completely butchered it by just ruining the aspect ratio or whatever. This is a completely kind of different scenario where it's just too much blank space on the top and bottom. But again, for authenticity reasons, they still kept it on the US TV cut. So I appreciate that. You can watch either cut to see if there's really any differences, but there really isn't. Even the end credits fades in from the bottom, and in the theatrical version, it just starts coming in from the top. But in the TV cut, it starts fading in around here, and then keeps going up. So it clearly was not really made for a TV release, but it just was. And then you have Richard Hill in stereo, which is just the main opening title credits with the main theme in stereo. It actually sounds really nice, and it just has the images playing from that opening credit sequence, but yeah. And then, of course, theatrical trailer and photo gallery. Now, this one is the one that they went all out for. It is a superb restoration. The audio, again, sounds great, except for that one section, which he mentions in the psychic restoration. He mentions how they had to re-edit that whole sequence to get the audio properly in enough that you could hear and understand what they're talking about. Ironically, that whole sequence isn't actually in the TV version. It's only in the theatrical version. It's a really nice release. I just don't think it's a great film, because it's not a film. It's a TV pilot that was a 90-minute pilot for a TV show that just never launched, and no one wanted to buy it, so they were like, alright, we'll just release it to cinemas instead. So they release it to cinemas, even though it literally ends with a tag of, oh my god, I'm getting this premonition, there's a nun in Paris and she's getting attacked, we have to go to Paris now. So it's trying to insinuate that they're going to continue. But it didn't, because it didn't do well. Nobody liked it. Nobody wanted to watch it. So, despite the fact that it exists on physical in a spectacular way, it's not great. It's very much a messy whodunit with a bunch of different, oh, it was this person, no, it was that person. I didn't really realize that they were doing all these red herrings, and I was like, oh, they're just doing all these red herrings. But I'm like, why? It's so obvious who the actual killer is. They told you at the start. Not really, but and it's not really even a killer. It's just what's actually happening. But it still has a supernatural element that I like. Leonard Nimoy's character has psychic visions or whatever, which aren't always well utilized or consistent throughout whatever, because it's still a partner co-op like mystery. Imagine X-Files with the, will they, won't they, but it's filmed in the 70s because it is the 70s, so it has that 70s feel to it. So it's not the worst. I just didn't rate it highly. I gave it like 2 out of 5. I was like, it's fine. It's just not that interesting. And again, if this is your jam, if you really like this kind of stuff, then here's a one-off mystery like a Columbo episode, and which actually he talks about on the special features, Jonathan Wood, saying this replaced Columbo in some regions of the UK. So there were some TV releases that showed Baffled instead of an episode of Columbo, which would have been one of the longer episodes of Columbo. So yeah, it's an interesting film, realistically, and I like what it goes for. Again, the supernatural elements are probably the more interesting element to it, same as the character dynamics, but there's not a lot of supernatural stuff. At one stage, I think Jonathan Moore was talking about how they cast 2 different actors to play the same character because there's an insinuation of the person's getting younger, even though it's pretty obvious to me when I realized that they said, oh, hey, you're that person from before, but you look different. I realized, yeah, they do look different because it's a different actress, because the supernatural element is that they're sucking the youth out of one person and giving it to another person to make them younger. So I'm like, oh, I get what they're doing. So, like, the main mystery is actually a supernatural thing, but they don't really talk about it until the main charm is, like, revealed and whatever. So again, all this stuff I picked up on really quickly, like, oh, is that guy the father? Is that guy actually dead? All this kind of stuff was, like, pretty obvious to me, so. And last but not least, we have Scream Pretty Peggy with Betty Davis, of all people, which is great. She's interesting in the film. Some lines she's not, but most of the time she's fine. Anyway, so yeah, you get some interesting artwork. I wouldn't say it's my favorite. It's one of those times where you'll look at an imprint thing and you'll realize that maybe part of the image kind of spoils part of the movie, but you don't notice it until you notice it. So I notice it looking at it, but it's fine. Anyway, so it's 1080 from a 2K scan, audio commentary by film historian Steve Mitchell and Howard S. Berger, and it's a TV spot. It's in 1:33:1, so it's the 4:3, and it is LPCM 2.0 mono, an hour and 14 minutes long. This was another one of those, made-for-TV movies, and I kind of actually really like the style of them. Like this one and The Deadly Dream, they have that energy where they're just this narrative. This one, you could tell a lot more times when there was meant to be ad breaks. There was at least once or twice where I'm like, there's definitely an ad break there. There's definitely an ad break there. But like, there's no like fade to blacks or anything. It's just the way that it cuts to the next scene. Baffled, on the other hand, that's meant for a TV show. That was I was a bit trickier on. But this one, in terms of video and audio, it really looked great. Much like with Baffled, it was a nice, clean presentation. The colours were nice, the costuming, everything about it looked really good. There was no visual errors or any dust or dirt or anything. Healthy levels of grain and everything. So, for the most part, I can say this is a really nice release for this film. The audio as well didn't have any issues with the 2.0 mono in this case. Sounded great. There was a great score to the movie, and you could really hear that encapsulate the film. There's some nice effects levels to the tracks because some of the scenes set at nighttime are very windy, and you can hear that wind because it's mostly like leaves blowing around, so it never felt distorted or anything. All the audio, all people talking, everything sounded natural. You could understand what they were saying, so I had no issues. Realistically, really clean, really nice presentation. In terms of the film itself, I'm thinking 3 out of 5. Like, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was fun. It had a nice, convincing atmosphere the whole time. The characters were fun. Not all the acting was great, but for the most part, it's a small cast. It works well. I really like the score to it. It just kept it going. It kept it creepy. It kept you on your toes, kind of guessing. Like, I was literally watching it thinking, like, what's the twist going to be? Is it going to be this? Is it going to be that? The thing is, I kind of guessed the twist much earlier, and it was a bit... I don't know. It felt a bit more obvious, especially when it got to the reveal. I'm like, they're going down that avenue, aren't they? They're really going down. They went down the avenue I expected, but for the most part, I think it works out in the end. Great use of Chekhov's gun. I'll give them that. The young actress would be Cian Barbara Allen, is really interesting. Ted Bessel's interesting as well. Betty Davis. She's credited as guest star, which is really funny because she's kind of bedridden for most of the film. But when she's there, she's pretty fun. She's pretty hard-balling in the film, so I'll give her that. There's only like one or two lines of dialogue where it just didn't feel like she read the dialogue right. Like, I don't think she put the appropriate amount of emphasis on what she was meant to be saying. I'm like, should she have said it that way? I don't think she should have said it that way. But yeah, for the most part, I think it's a really fun TV movie. Definitely worth checking out, especially in this set. So let's look at the whole entire thing. So as a whole package, Imprint's first TV movie of the week bundle is really fun. They all have some really interesting visual and audio, showcasings. Again, The Deadly Dream being the weakest one, but it still looks good except for its dirt and dust and whatever. But for the most part, like, again, the transfer is really nice and the audio sounds good. Baffled, amazing. An amazing restoration, solid audio track except for the one minor tweak which I had mentioned. And again, I liked that the video essay actually talked about why that specific part was actually a bit of a troubled thing to edit. And Scream Pretty Peggy was probably the most consistent of the whole. Its audio and picture was clear and crisp throughout the whole entire thing. Obviously, when it comes to the actual films themselves, I definitely prefer The Deadly Dream and Scream Pretty Peggy over Baffled. As much as Baffled has a great restoration and a plethora of special features, which are all about the restoration, aside from, again, each one having an individual commentary, which I appreciate, it comes down to one of those things of Baffled, for me, wasn't as interesting. Like, it might be if you like that particular style, but again, because it's the failed pilot of a TV show and the other two are TV movies, it feels a bit like there's not enough, stakes to it. It feels a lot looser in its own way because that's kind of like what the idea is. If you can do this formula, then you can repeat that for 60-minute intervals for the next, however many episodes you do, or 90-minute intervals for however many that you do, if they do the Columbo route of just doing random episodes once every couple of weeks. And so it's like, it would be nice if they had have continued it to a degree. It was a interesting concept, but it wasn't as well executed as I would have liked, whereas The Deadly Dream and Scream Pretty Peggy worked for exactly the runtime and the narrative that they had, so I think that was great. I think the artwork on each set is really nice. Again, the only one that has really the most special is Baffled, because it had a theatrical artwork piece, whereas the other two is just artwork that they were able to collage together, which I appreciate. At least they put in some effort for it. But the set, I think, is really nice. This back cover in particular is a fantastic choice for what they did for the set. And yeah, so for the most part, I definitely would recommend the set. I definitely enjoyed them. Again, Baffled I wasn't as huge on, but it wasn't the worst use of 96 minutes, and again, you can watch the 90-minute version if you're not really wanting to get into the bit of some padding scenes and stuff like that. So I think even one of the reviews on Letterboxd said how they watched the longer cut and they feel like if they had watched the shorter cut, it might have been a bit better because it probably cut out some scenes that you didn't really need. So really depends on how you want to look at it. But yeah, fantastic set overall. I'm very interested to see what Imprint comes out with next in this particular movie of the week line, especially these ones that were actually movie of the weeks, the stuff that came out on TV one night and you probably never saw it again unless they did a rerun a couple months later. So, yeah, and I feel like maybe some more featurettes talking about what the movie of the week is, like understanding the style, the genre and whatnot. I feel like that could have been a nice thing to kind of understand what exactly you're watching, especially for, I don't know, younger audiences, technically like myself, who might not understand what a TV movie of the week is and the context and period of time in which they came out. This is stuff that might be detailed per film on the commentary tracks, but at the same time, they're not very long, so I don't exactly expect it to be a lot of detail talking about that kind of thing. So, yeah, there's definitely things I would like to see in another Imprint set like this. Just a video essay, just explaining what this is. I feel like if they had put it in this set, at least it would have given you perspective if you bought the rest of the sets to give you an idea. So, I don't know if they'll rectify that in the future. They might not. They might stick with what they've got here. And to be fair, these are really good presentations. So, yeah. Check it out. See you guys next time. Adios.